Hey everyone, it's so cool to be able to sit down with, like tattooing is an ancient and prestigious craft and it's so awesome. Some people can bring some of that amazing history to us. And so we got the honor to sit down with a veteran tattoo artist, somebody who's truly plucking some of the history and moving it forward and being able to bring it to those of us in the modern day. We're sitting here with Lucky Bastard. We appreciate you taking the time to chat with us, brother.
Oh man, I'm stoked to be here. I'm glad I get a
Awesome.
place to talk about this stuff.
Heck yeah. Well, like I always like to say, depending on who's getting to watch this, we want to know more about you and find out where you come from. And we know you got a long history in tattooing. So why don't you give us a little bit of a background story, where you came from and how you got into tattooing?
Yeah, I grew up in LA. I was a kind of a knucklehead kid, got into gangs and stuff pretty young and did a lot of time in juvenile hall and things like that. So a lot of my friends were older gangsters and a lot of punk rockers because that was the scene I was in. And LA in the 80s was if there was more than three of you, you were in a gang. So it just ended up
Hmm.
that way. Gang culture kind of permeated the landscape when I was growing up. So I got involved in that. And when you get involved with that and all the punk rock stuff, there was a lot of tattoos going on all my older friends. So a lot of them actually influenced me to start tattooing because I could draw and I had been drawing since I was a little kid. So, but they just wanted free tattoos, really. They just wanted more tattoos. For them, tattoos was an intimidation factor, and it was a way to
Hmm.
keep the squares away from you, kind of thing. So
Hmm.
they were
Hmm.
they were the very first scratch pads that I had were just a bunch of knuckleheads. I'd just show up at their pad with all my equipment and work on them.
Hmm.
And I eventually got in as a helper at Long Beach Tattoo, which was connected to the Burt Grimm's tattoo family. The Shaw
Yes.
family owned both of those shops. So the Long Beach shop was the ghetto shop. It was kind of trying to keep the ghetto away from the sailors, keep those two from mixing too much. So
Hmm.
everything was like 10 or 20 bucks cheaper at Long Beach Tattoo. So it was a definitely a good place to learn about tattooing when there was lots of gangsters and pimps and whores and all the wonderful ghetto stuff that you would find there on Anaheim Street on any given day. But eventually, I moved to San Francisco and worked at the Picture Machine, which is where I pretty much got most of my time behind the machine, like really tattooing 12-hour shifts.
Hmm.
Most of the time I would take other people's shifts if they wanted to go or whatever. I was just so hungry to tattoo, and that place was. It reminded me of Burt Grimm's. I mean, it was just all this old flash on the wall and old photos and this the stencil acetate stencils were still there and all the needle making gear was still there from when Pat Martinique had been alive. So that place was just a great another training ground to get better at tattooing. And so I was around a lot of this kind of history without really even knowing it, just being there. And then eventually I did start to travel to tattoo. And one of the first places out of the country I went was to Amsterdam to work at Hanky Panky Shop. And
Oh, snap.
he had
Hmm.
the original Amsterdam Tattoo Museum was around the corner from the tattoo shop, which was in the red light district. So it was, for a young man in his 20s, it was amazing to be in that, just around all of that stuff. And I thought I'd seen a lot of, tattoo history stuff. I stayed pretty on top of, any at that point in the 80s and 90s, it was like anything you would find, you would snip all the little clippings and all that stuff, any kind of information about what we were doing because there was so little of it. And then I got to this building in Amsterdam where Hank had all these, it wasn't just flash and photos, it was actual machines and books, like books I'd never seen before. All these European books, these British books, all about tattooing, and it really opened my mind to, or opened my eyes to the fact that this is not just this narrow little field that I thought it was. I mean, this was something that was our global tribe. So that really
Hmm.
influenced me as far as just being more interested in tattoo culture and tattoo history.
Oh, it's amazing. And I mean, like I said, you're coming up in the 80s and 90s when tattooing did feel probably very isolated. especially, before there was the internet and everybody was connecting so much and knowing what was going on. It did feel very, very small. Just curious though, how old were you when you really started getting the tattooing? Like,
I started tattooing by hand on myself and a couple of friends, I think when I was like 13. And then I got my first machine from a convict friend of mine who I met through some people. He was the only tattooer I'd ever met that was going to give
mm-hmm,
me the time of day as a 16-year-old kid. And he gave me my first machine, which was an aluminum framed animal marker. It wasn't even really supposed to be for doing tattoos like we do tattoos today. But
oh wow,
that was my first. And then from there, I started tattooing pretty much immediately. Not very good, everything was really rough.
sure,
But I
mm-hmm,
did, I was 17 when I got to be a helper at Long Beach Tattoo, which was completely illegal since you can't even be in that shop until you're 18. But it was a
hmm.
different time then. You know what I mean? Like it
Yeah,
was,
yeah.
there weren't a whole lot of us around. So,
Yeah. No, I appreciate you saying that, because you just said there was a tattooer that gave you the time of day and that it was really difficult. Like it's just totally different back then, right? It wasn't,
oh yeah,
you
man.
couldn't access anything. I mean, it was, tell us a little bit more about how it was right at the beginning though, like how you were, your day to day kind of thing, just give people kind of a taste of what it was like.
I mean, just trying to get information back then, like going to shops and trying to talk to these people. And like, what I realized was, you just need to get tattooed. And so when I started getting
Mm,
tattooed more by, not just going to some random shop every once in a while, but I started going to Burt Grimm's and I started getting tattooed by Joe Vegas, who was at the
mm,
time, just really banging out amazing work in this crazy little shop in the corner of Long Beach that was completely shut down. There was nothing else around. It was a really dark period in LA history. Everything was all kind of grimy still. So, but that place, that time and that place, it was amazing to me that these guys, were able to do this. And so I just kept getting tattooed, and I'd ask a couple
mm,
questions. And Joe is super open about helping me out with drawing stuff. Nothing technical, just like how to draw for tattoos, which I really thank him to this day for that, because if I would have jumped behind the machine right away, I probably would not have learned to draw as well. Like
mm,
drawing
mm-hmm.
was not a prerequisite at the time because everything was all
Sure.
getting picked off the walls. But there were these
Mm-hmm.
artists, these families of artists that Joe came from the Bob Roberts school of tattooing, where it was like, no, we draw this stuff, and
Mm-hmm.
like Malone said, we add our link to the chain, and that stuff
Mm-hmm.
resonated with me too, is like being a part of this longer history of these designs. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, man, it was really hard to get anybody to take you serious. And even once I got the helper gig, it was like, oh man, I'm not allowed to tell you about that. I can't tell you about making needles, and I can't tell you about making pigments, and I can only show you
Mm-hmm.
this. And like, if
Mm-hmm.
you want to get your art on the wall, you got to learn how to cut an acetate stencil, even though nobody used them anymore. But it was just for these
Mm-hmm.
traditions within the secret society of the shop, even. And so,
Mm-hmm.
like, but all that stuff I think was motivating for the tattooers of my generation and then generations
Mm-hmm.
before them. Was like, man, just to get behind the dummy rail, to be on the other
Yeah.
side of the door and go to the back room of the shop. I mean, these were huge things back then because there was so much mystery in just the shop, like with
Mm-hmm.
with everything being as it is now, and TV shows about tattoo shops, and the
Mm-hmm.
internet kind of ripped all the mystery of it out. It used to be really cool to walk into those places and have these kind of grumpy old men yell at you a little bit, like that was kind of part of the experience. But like, I get the experience now. It's just a lot more friendly, which makes it easier for a lot more people that wouldn't have gotten tattooed in those situations will get
Yeah.
tattooed now.
Yeah. Yeah. No, everything happens for a reason, and now you're right. Tattoos are on all demographics, all types, all walks of life, which is great. But there is some of that lost in the losing of that like hardcore. You had to earn that, that. And I feel like when you really earn something like that, you appreciate it so much more, and you carry it much higher, right? You're more about putting in the hard work because you put in a lot of hard work to get to it. And I feel today, because it is pretty easy to get into it, it's easy to also get out of it. And that's just, I feel like something we're kind of seeing in the tattoo industry today. But I do feel a lot of tattoo clients are still, they're seeing behind the door a little bit with Ink Masters and those shows and stuff like that. But they are still really relying on us to know more than them. Like they feel, I think there's, like, you got a machine, you know what you're doing kind of thing. When we know now that, anyone can go on Amazon and buy some tools. So, but I appreciate you kind of sharing some of the background, because I think it's something that we want to tease out of this next generation. So they want to look back and they want to digest some of that old culture. And that's what you're trying to provide today. You're trying to bring tattoo history into a place where there's lots of us in tattoo conventions, and working on some of your traveling tattoo museum stuff. Tell us more about that.
Sure.
Give us
Yeah, yeah.
a story on how that kind of came to fruition.
So the Tattoo Heritage Project is actually was Good Time Charlie Cartwright's
Mm-hmm.
brainchild. He
Mm-hmm.
was closing his shop, his end of the trail shop in Modesto, and still had a lot of love for this thing and wanted to continue on. And was he posed the question of, why don't we have a national tattoo museum? Why do we,
Mm-hmm.
why don't we? And it's a great question. And so that
Mm-hmm.
spawned the Tattoo Heritage Project, which is the aim of the project is to establish a tattoo museum, a national tattoo museum, hopefully in Long Beach, California, which is again where a lot of the people involved in the original inception of the Heritage Project, Jack Rudy, Chewy Quintanar, Corey Miller, Carrie Barba, Charlie, these people, they all have an affinity for Long Beach and for the Pike and for that whole part of our history. So we're really
Mm-hmm.
trying to get it to happen there. And so that was started a couple of years ago by Charlie and a small group of the first founders. And I got involved about a year ago to do specifically to work on a convention project, which is what's the Traveling Tattoo Museum. So
Mm-hmm.
the concept for that came from my experience with all these tattoo museums that I've been a part of. I was at the first Amsterdam museum, and then I was at the second iteration of the tattoo museum in Amsterdam. I went to Horiyoshi's museum in Yokohama and helped with that. And so I've been around it. And the question was posed at the second Amsterdam museum. I was with a tattooer, and he was asking me like, "Wow, this is amazing. Who's paying for all this?" And I was like, I have no idea. And he said, well, it's
Mm-hmm.
not coming from people walking through the door or getting tattooed in the little shop we got here. And I
Mm-hmm.
was like, wow, that's a good question. And, they were trying to get government funding, both local and bigger, but it just didn't end up happening. And we lost that one. But
Mm-hmm.
when this thing came along, I knew right away that the best way for us to raise funds is to go out on the road and bring some of these artifacts, bring some of this information and some of these artists out to the public and to other tattooers. Because like these conventions now are, everybody's showing up, and it's not just the
Mm-hmm.
public. And there's a lot of tattooers coming to these things. There's more tattooers than ever. And so
Mm-hmm.
it's a built-in for us, because it's hard to get tattooers to just give you their money. they like they'll rally once, and sometimes you can get a couple of them to rally twice or three times. But if you just keep
Yeah.
asking for handouts, they're just going to stop. So we're
Yeah.
transactional tattooers. So,
Yeah.
that's why I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to take the traveling museum concept out on the road, because then it's easy for people like the tattooers who would be working in our booth. They get to donate their time instead of their money. You know what I mean? And so it's not a hit. It's something enjoyable that they get to do, and the public gets to get tattooed by these people that they probably normally wouldn't be. So if we can get this thing off the ground, then I'm pretty sure that would be a big part of raising funds to help us to establish an actual brick and mortar building. But getting this thing off the ground is costing us money. So we don't have that money. So we set up a GoFundMe
Hmm.
as more of a receptacle for money. I'm not asking people to like, hey, go give me $100. What I want, what I wanted to get out there, one of the messages I wanted to get out there for people is to, we've always had really good success with people just doing their own thing and then donating. So like Tim Hendricks didn't make it to the show we did in San Diego. So he built a machine, he put it up on his Instagram. He auctioned that thing off with a couple of prints and gave us thousands of dollars, for that. And so like if you do that, if you're a painter, if you're a machine builder, or even if you just want to do a shop tattoo flash day or any of that stuff that's grassroots, that's on you guys, you know what I mean? It's on the public. It's on our culture to kind of do this. Like we've had conventions where people put together a CeeLo game, which as a nonprofit, we can't really have anything to do with that. But how that money gets to us isn't our
No idea.
problem. So if you want to run an illegal dice game, that's not my thing, but whatever it takes, like, because again, I don't like asking people for money. It's not really my
Sure.
thing. I'd rather have something I could give you in return, which is hopefully this super museum row booth situation, which I got to
Hmm.
talk about Troy Temple from Villain
Hmm.
Arts, because
Hmm.
he really pushed this thing forward for me and for us. We did the one Villain Arts show in San Diego about a year ago, and I got a booth together, and we had a bunch of people in there tattooing for the cause, and it was like a dry run to see if we could pull it off. And Troy was super cool about it, and he invited us to do some stuff with him in the future if we were going to consider doing this in a consistent way. So I dreamed up this kind of steamer trunk idea, the traveling tattooer carnival
Hmm.
steamer trunk
Hmm.
that opens up and would have display cases and of artifacts and flash
Hmm.
and photos, and that would be the central part of it, with one station for whoever the old man or the superstar or whoever the fuck ends up in there, right? And then next to that would be the get what you get games, because that seems to be
Hmm.
really big in shops right now. But I wanted to do one that was a shooting gallery with
Hmm.
Charlie's something for everyone sheet. That was where that concept came, with like a
Hmm.
rubber pistol gun or rifle or whatever, and then do one for the Burt Grimm ring toss, so we could have
Hmm.
them. So if you're not into black and gray and you're into traditional, we'd have a bunch of different designs set up there, and those would be good because we'd have some top notch artists working in those booths doing that, and then we would also have it so that everybody that's working in all the booths would have to do one of those a day, or one during at least the convention. So if Jack Rudy's there, maybe we could get him to do one. You know what I mean? And it would just be
Hmm.
random.
Hmm.
So people would have this opportunity to get these kind of cool things and just stuff like that. Like we want to try and set it up so it's a lot like a carnival, like an old
Yeah.
carnival, a lot of hand painted banners and stuff like
Hmm.
that. So it's going to cost a little bit of dough. So that's why we're trying to get this thing off the ground. And so once the cost of that is put into place and we're actually on the road, then it should be pretty self-sufficient and hold on it, on its own.
Hmm. I think it's great, and we're privy to see kind of a layout of it, of the design that you have. It looks awesome. I think it's going to be so cool, especially it's interactive like that because it's cool. I
Right.
mean, I think it's so important for people to see the artifacts and to see the history, but to get kind of a little of that flavor too, where it's like, sit down, shut up, let's do this, just kind of, you know, that carnival feel, like I said, it makes it more of an experience. And I think that's going to be so important, the clients, for one, they're going to see that, but also tattooers to really develop a taste for wanting more of it, right? To know, like
Right.
what you said, because some of them feel like they're like a link that's not linked to nothing, right? They came
Yeah.
out of the box, they're great at tattooing, but they feel like they're, not connected to anything.
Yeah, that was one of the things that I noticed when we did this show in San Diego was there was this huge generation gap, this huge
Hmm.
separation. The pandemic definitely didn't help that at all, you
Yeah.
know. And so there's one group of people that are like, you know, trying to hold on to a lot of this stuff from the past, and another group of people that are calling them gatekeepers, and you know, it just goes back and
Hmm.
forth, and it's like there isn't that unity or that continuity between generations anymore. And so the but it's interesting to me because it's so broad now. I mean, there's so many subgenres of what we're doing, and those little cliques are their own little worlds, and it's like
Hmm.
trying to get
Hmm.
all these guys to connect to their own past has been, you know, it's happening, and I've seen it happen when we were in San Diego. You know, Chuy Quintanar, who's one of the board members, has a vast collection of tattoo artifacts, and he brought with him some key ones. And one of the ones that he brings with him sometimes is the first machine, right? The Edison electric pencil,
Mm. Oh,
which
snap.
there's only 15 of those around that we know of, and
Wow.
he's got some of them. So he
That's amazing.
yeah, and I'll watch him talk to you know, because a lot of the young black and gray Latino tattooers will go to him when they see him at the you know at the conventions. And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
I watched him with a group of young men, and he's showing them this machine, and he's explaining to them that this is a coil and it's also a rotary, and it was born
Yeah.
on the same day at the same time. And so you can see their minds get blown, and that's where they
Yeah.
run this connection, because like say
Mm.
black and gray tattoos, a lot of these guys, their history goes right back to the Walkman radio, right?
Hmm.
Or the Walkman
Hmm.
tape player motor. Like everything for
Yeah.
them starts with prison tattoos, but it goes further back. But
Hmm.
that's their stopping point. So once you see them connect further back and realize that they're connected to all of this, that's that moment. That's when you're like, all right, we got this
Yeah.
guy. He's now with us. You know what I mean? Like,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
like you're saying, like they feel disconnected because we're not doing anything to make them feel any more connected to what we're doing.
Yeah. You just hit it. You spoke the words I was going to say. Is you're maybe coming from an older generation of tattooing and seeing how it was, but you're at least trying to bring it forward, right? And trying to extend something to this newer generation, which I think is so important. Because if we don't, if you don't, and then it will go away, right?
Right.
I think you had made a statement that's like, if we don't tell our story, the Starbucks of tattooing will tell the story, you know, of how
Exactly. And
everyone's
that's
using robotic tats, you know.
right, right. And that's the thing, is like we're in a position now where we still have enough of these heroes alive to
Yeah.
document them and to get their input on this stuff so that we can set something up for the future generations. Because that's the thing about history, is it's not a young man's game. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So a lot of these
Yeah.
people, we're waiting for them to reach an age where they're actually interested. So we're in this
Hmm.
weird position right now where like there are a bunch more people tattooing, but they're so young that they haven't gotten to that point. Like when you did an apprenticeship, when you could only get in through a gatekeeper,
Hmm.
those those history lessons were part of it. And even though a lot of
Yeah.
people hated that shit, you know, like they didn't care about that, they just wanted to move forward, they're grateful for it now. You know, the
Yeah.
understanding of that. I mean, that's the same. If you go to college, you have to do art history before you can move forward in art. You know what I mean? Like they want you to
Hmm.
know that for a reason. And that's the same with us. And so it's a hard sell to Zoomers and even millennials. You know what I mean? Like they're not
Hmm.
that interested in that because they're really caught up in the social media echo chamber of like a lot of them are just copying each other and seeing who can kind of spiral this style the furthest. And that's cool too. I mean, it's all hustle. And coming from the carny hustle of tattoo, you got to let these motherfuckers hustle. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? Like
Hmm.
that's what
Hmm.
they do, and that's cool, and that's their angle. They don't even know they're angling sometimes. They're very, very, very serious about their art, which is amazing. I'm serious about mine too. And it's like, oh yeah, I guess when you think about it from an outsider's perspective, like how into drawing flowers on people's butts can you be? You know what I mean? But like for me, that's my whole world, you know? And it's like, so for these guys that are doing styles that people don't like, or they're trivializing their abilities by saying, well, they can't do this or they can't do that or whatever, it's like we never had that opportunity. We were forced to be well-rounded and
Yeah.
be a little bit good at a lot of things, which was cool,
Yeah.
and that's a great thing. But it's not necessary anymore
Hmm.
for a whole new generation of people that are coming up as specialists. And we got to give it to them. That's fine, you know. Like we
Hmm.
set it up for that. We made
Yeah.
tattooing easier. We pushed forward pigment research, needle research,
Hmm.
machine technique building. You know, like we.
Hmm.
But a lot of my peers and the older peers are super pissed, even though it's our fault. We set it up. Now you don't have to go through all this stuff. 50% of my career was spent fighting my tools. You know, I'm
Yes.
either making
Yeah.
needles or tuning machines or making
Mm.
pigment or make, you know, it's just like, man, I just want to make some tattoos. And it was like
Yep.
all these obstacles that were in your way. Now they're not in the way. So these kids are coming in at 2 years with basically what would have been 7 years of experience. You know what
Yep.
I mean? Like, because they didn't have
Hmm.
to deal with any of this other crap. They just got to grab a machine. They don't even need an autoclave. They don't even
Hmm.
know all this stuff. You know, they don't need the
Hmm.
infrastructure of tattoo. It's like we finally got to that point, and now the older guys are all mad about it. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
It's like,
Hmm.
no, man, we
Hmm.
did this for us, but this is how they're dealing with it, and this is how they're gonna take it. You know, and like I remember when what was it Walmart, I think, was selling machines on their website,
Hmm.
and man, people were pissed. But I was like, I can't wait 20 years from now to hear the story of the guy who's on top, who's like, I got my first machine from Walmart. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, because
Hmm.
it's a pencil. You know, it's
Hmm.
not about the pencil, it's about who's got that pencil in their hand. So, access to information, access to equipment, all of this stuff, it's awesome, man. It's going to make so many better tattooers, you know. There's
Hmm.
going to be a lot of
Hmm.
crappy ones along the way too, and a lot of people fucking their friends up and doing all the
Yeah.
stuff that's going to happen with that kind of open forum like that. But the cream will rise to the top, and the people that are serious will always kind of be the serious ones. And the core of
Hmm.
tattoo culture is being held together by those people. You know what I mean? Like even
Hmm.
if they don't know they're involved, like that's what's going to keep this, because there's never ever been a reason that they could pin down why we do tattoos, why we get tattooed, and why we tattoo each other. So when your basic stuff is that weird already, then you're just gonna, you know, you got nowhere to go but up. Like we can take this in any direction we want. And so I'm excited to see what people do with tattoo now that all those restrictions are gone. You know what I mean? Like I
Hmm.
wasn't allowed to tattoo faces or hands. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? Like, and then blackout arms and all this stuff is like, it's neat to me, man. It's like cool.
Hmm.
Because now
Hmm.
after blackout arms, it's like, ooh, now I'm going to put white on top of the blackout arm. And it's like, it's almost like a way to keep people getting tattooed. And cool, man. If they're into it, you know, like, you know, Charlie, good time Charlie, always breaking down wisdom for me and all of us. And he always has said that these people are in tattoos, man. There are people. If we don't accept them, who will?
Love that. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, no, the last, I don't know, the last 2, 3 minutes of you just sharing, like tattooing what it used to take to do a tattoo, fighting with the tools, and now paving the way for now where you can pick up a rotary, have amazing ink and a digital design. You can just create artwork that's just mind blowing. And
Right.
I love that you're just so accepting of it and appreciative of it, because you're right. I mean, there's some that are so frustrated, but I think it's just a side of wisdom that should be carried forward into this conversation as you're sharing the history. Is like, hey, this is where it was, and you can learn a lot from it, right? You can still learn a lot from how, when your style isn't always that popular, being pretty good at a lot of things is still pretty helpful, right?
Right.
and different ways of being creative in your marketing can help promote your business. Like there's stuff you can learn, but then also the fact that you're open to the future of tattooing will make the younger generation more comfortable with sharing with you what they want to do, and there can be a collaborative effort as we move forward, right? They feel accepted, and again, that goes
Right.
back to reconnecting that link that's been kind of
Yeah.
disconnected. And I think that's amazing what you're doing. And I think everything you just said just needs to be like just shared, especially coming from somebody with over 3 decades of tattooing under their belt.
Well, thanks, man. I
So
appreciate that. It's really cool.
yeah, yeah. Well, and so moving forward, like say a year ago, you did the San Diego test run, and
Mhm.
now moving into 2025, what's it look like? What you got planned, brother?
It's looking, it's looking good. A lot of what I needed money for originally for the build out is getting a lot of it's getting donated, which is super cool. One of the guys that's helping us with making these mobile display cases, which is has been was going to be one of the biggest costs that we were going to incur on the build, was he's donating all his time and all of his all the actual materials and everything. So that turned out to be super cool. And then I've got a couple other guys that are going to donate their time to help build the main box that we're going to be kind of carting around on the trucks. That build is going to probably end up being a lot cheaper than I thought as well. So a lot of the money that we're actually asking for is not really for the stuff, because a lot of the stuff is we're going to incur some cost, but a lot of it's being donated. And when we come time to paint these things and banners and painting the steamer trunk and all this stuff, we've got tons of artists that have already offered their time and talents to do that. So we're really just going to be getting enough money to make sure that we can fly the people that we need out there to staff these booths for at least a couple of shows, hotel rooms, insurance for all these artifacts. There's like all these underlying costs that
Yeah.
aren't like the actual, like the thing. We can build it pretty quick and we can get it on the road pretty quick, but we have to have people out there doing it. And like, like I said, all this stuff costs money with staffing people and having, and so that we can give these people the best shows possible, because a
Mm-hmm.
lot of it's going to be, we're going to start asking for volunteers when we show up to a city, because we'll be
Yeah.
contacting the different artists, and we'll be relying a lot on through social media and stuff on people telling us like who they want to see, like, because a
Yeah.
lot of times we're going to show up in a city where I don't know who anybody is, like I'm going to be
Mm-hmm.
relying on other people's opinions, and this is going to be a very community driven thing. So hopefully if we can get this thing off the ground in the next 2 or 3 months, I would hope, you know what I mean, like, because the build out has begun on the hardest part, which was the display cases, and now building the box won't take that long, and we're getting a little bit of money. I think we're going to get some from, we're doing an art show at the in December, $200 max art show. Sullen, who's helped us a
Mm-hmm.
lot. They've been very, very
Yeah.
cool. I mean, they love Charlie and Jack and everybody. So like, and they've
Mm-hmm.
done a lot with them before, and they're just down to help with anything we do for them. So they've
So
been
cool.
super helpful as well. But yeah, like it's just, like I said, it's just getting the word out there and then letting people know what we're doing, because it gets a little confusing with that. I don't know if the Tattoo Heritage Project is the tattoo museum and what's a traveling
Mm-hmm.
tattoo museum. It gets a little bit confusing. So it is all one thing with
Okay.
one goal, which is to get this
Mm-hmm.
museum built. But to get there, this traveling show is probably going to help a lot, especially on just raising awareness and getting people to know
Yeah.
that we exist. Because once we're out at these shows, like the artist driven shows, this, where they're put on by a tattooer once a year, that's their show. Those shows are almost like preaching to the choir. Everybody that goes to those shows already kind of
Mm-hmm.
is into this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
when I saw what Villain Arts was doing and other shows like that, these kind of bigger, the future of tattoo conventions, I guess, it's like they're bringing in people that I've never seen at tattoo conventions before. And now, that's those people are the ones we want to get. Those are the people we want to make contact with, are people that we
Mm-hmm.
we haven't seen around for the last 20 years. And, I want to make contact with a lot more young tattooers that are doing
Hmm.
cool stuff in those little sub genres of tattooing. And I want to have them in our booth. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
I want to find the
Hmm.
best young guy who's doing this particular style and have him next to the oldest guy from that town. You know what I mean? Like,
Hmm.
that's how I see our row. That's how I see our booth, as a place for all these things to kind of overlap and to connect and to make it so that, and it's one of those things where if we just keep showing up, eventually people that would pass by us are they're going to stop eventually and be like, what is going on here? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then if we
Hmm.
can get them into the booth, there's something there that will connect them to their past, to the bigger past,
Hmm. That's so cool. So once you, was any immediate like shows you're looking to go to next, or just so I mean, so we could put it
um
on this interview and kind of
right.
start pointing people towards it.
I think right now we have the next big thing, because it's we're coming up on Christmas and everything. So I think right now the next
Sure.
big thing we're doing is that art show, December
December.
14th, I think, at the second floor in Huntington Beach. But the art can come from anywhere; it doesn't really matter. And that one you can check on our socials. It's all on there, for the Tattoo Museum and everybody. I think
Hmm.
that's the next big one. We just did one for Carlos Torres's art show. We did a little thing for that, and so we'll do some pop up stuff here and there. So if you just kind of keep an eye on the social
Hmm.
media, that kind of will show you a lot of this stuff. Because it's all not exactly a well-oiled machine or anything. We're just kind of doing this on the cuff. So a lot of times we'll be
Sure.
like, "Oh
Sure.
man, we're doing this thing next week," and we'll just
Hmm.
like
Hmm.
be doing it. So
Hmm.
we don't really have. I'm trying to think. I don't think that we have anything yet until next year. We'll see how
Okay.
that goes.
No, no, that's dope.
But
I mean, we plan on, interviewing all the Tattoo Heritage Project,
awesome,
stakeholders
cool,
and
cool.
getting perspective. And I'm imagining as we get through everyone, we'll learn more about future conventions that you'll be at, and then
Yeah.
even, even like, Forrest and I have to make our way out to some of them and maybe do a little bit of live recording and kind of share what's going on in person and maybe
Oh, that'd be
even
great.
participate. So now that'll be awesome.
Yeah, I mean, and
Um,
that's always been kind of like, since Charlie put this thing together, it's always been like everybody that wants to help can help. Nobody's
mhm.
there's no right or wrong. It's just whatever you want to do, however you want to participate. The more the merrier. The more, because we're all you know on the same page. And we're all going for the same goal. So, yeah, we'd love to have
100%.
you involved.
Nice. Heck yeah. So, Forrest, as you've been kind of listening to this, and is there any perspective you have? Like, you got to see Forrest's bodysuit one day. Lucky, he's got a dope body work
Right on.
for some
All
amazing
right.
tattoo artists. So I like his perspective too because he's getting tattooed by some of the best in the game in their area. Anything stick out to you? You want to ask Lucky for the interview?
Yeah, I mean, I've mostly just been like inspired by like your mindset, really. Like, just pretty much Ben has touched on it of like not only just like your hard work and dedication to the craft of like, I don't know, the kind of whole old school mindset, like embodying that while also like connecting and like appreciating the newer school, I guess. So yeah, I'm just really curious if you had any type of like inspiration or mentorship as far as like your mindset, because it's just kind of blowing me away of like seeing how appreciative you are and like grateful for the
Mm-hmm.
past, present, and the future of tattooing as a whole. And I don't know, I feel like you never really see that in its entirety in somebody. So it sounds like you maybe got a little bit from Good Time Charlie, but yeah, I'm just curious where that kind of became instilled in you.
I mean, like, I I I sought out a lot of people, because when I was tattooing in San Francisco, it was during the magazine age, right, where our heroes were built in these magazines, and then these few
Mm-hmm.
publications that came out, and so I really wanted to seek these people out. I had a few years under my belt, and so like I made a point of going, starting at the '99 Tokyo convention was where I jumped off, and I traveled for the next 4 years. I stayed out of America. I would go to Australia for the winters and then go back through Japan and into Europe for the summers. And so I use that as like, I don't know, finishing school for tattooers or your master's
Mm-hmm.
degree or whatever. But I went and, I went and hung out with Hank, and I went and sought out Tintin and the Lou family, and a lot of these people that I had met at the 99 Tokyo convention. I just followed up on those friendships and kind of went around, and like all of these guys, especially the older ones, like they were very gracious. Like the higher you got on the ladder, the cooler these guys were, and the more open they were with information. Like Horiyoshi will stop tattooing to tell me or show me a technique, and it's not like there's no secrets with these guys. Like Philip, same thing. You have a question for him, he'll answer it. And he'll answer it honestly and tell you why he does what he does with this kind of, they all have this like catch me if you can kind of situation they're in. So it's like, it's not about the technique. Here's the technique. What are you going to do with it? So like all of these people, I just tried to pay attention and listen to them. And like, that's the thing is I spent so much time doing that I've acquired a lot of their wisdom. And, sometimes I play it off as my own, but, but for the most part, like I like to tell people where I got this information because it will hold more value for them, hopefully. You know what I mean? Like, and that's the thing is like, I've had the opportunity to be around a lot of the old guard, and so being around those guys gave me a perspective on this that like, I can't close off to it because I was younger than them and they let me in. So I have to do the same. If that's how this whole thing works. And those guys were super accepting, like I interviewed Hank years and years ago, and he was talking about Marcus Pacheco at Primal Urge in the 90s, and he's like, he was doing these fields of yellow. They were just huge 6x6 inch squares of yellow. He's like, I would never put that much yellow in a tattoo. I'd be afraid to put that much yellow in a tattoo. And in the grander scheme of things for this tattoo, it worked, and it's like, those guys were pushing the envelope in a way that these young people are pushing the envelope now. And it's just like those new school guys back then, the only difference is that they did learn from somebody. There wasn't this, I learned it from the internet or I learned it from a friend. It was like, that's why when you look at Aaron Kane or Marcus Pacheco's work from the 90s, it was new school, but it's very, very, very rooted in traditional tattoos. There's black outlines, there's black shading, and then there's color. You know what I mean? Like they didn't stray so far from those formulas because it was beat into their head as an apprentice, and like those things are, like I said, it's interesting to see what happens now. Because I do know people that are self-taught. Tim Hendricks was self-taught, and he's amazing. You know what I mean? And a lot of his tricks, he came up with those tricks. But even if you're self-taught, once you start meeting other tattooers and exchanging information, you start, if you've got your sponge on correctly, then you'll start to collect these things and incorporate them into your work. And so you no longer have one teacher, you have many teachers, like, and that's the thing is like all these people, Charlie's made, pivotal, I've had pivotal turns in my approach to tattooing from Charlie, from Bob Roberts, from Hank, from the one time I met Hardy, like all these things, they made me who I am and made me the artist I am now, and it's like, that's what I encourage in young people. That's why I want them to have more interaction with not just each other, but with us, but also with just other artists. Like a lot of these kids work by themselves and they isolate. And so they don't even get a chance to have that ability to bounce off of another artist. You know what I mean? Like that's huge, man. Like for me, it was always huge. Like I learned so much from the guys tattooing around me, like it's cool to be a private studio tattooer. I'm not saying don't do that, but there's something to be said about being in a room full of other artists and the fucking vibe of the machines and the people and the smell of blood in the air. These things are important, like they shouldn't be lost to time if at all possible, And I think, people are doing like private studios that are having more than one person now. You know what I mean? So I think it's gonna work its way out, but there's always gonna be a place for street shops and tattooers that just are well rounded in a lot of little things, and those guys are the heroes of tattoo. You know what I mean? Like that's where I came from. I do bodysuits now, but I didn't get there by not doing 1,000 Panthers. You know what I mean? Like it's the progression of where we are. And I know guys that they went a little bit further and they started to do big work and they didn't like it and they pulled back and they said, no, I'm just going to stay here. I know that when I come in, I might have a 0 day, but I might have a great day. And that kind of is a whole different approach to tattooing. You know what I mean? Like having everything scheduled out and you know what you're doing for the next week or month or whatever is one thing, but there's still something to be said about that. The fear of not making a tattoo that day, you know?
Yeah, the ramen winters, right? Like that's something that so
Right?
many don't know. Like if you don't
Yeah,
tattoo,
yeah,
you don't eat. And I feel like right now, this year specifically, is like the first kind of slow season for the industry after the past 5 years of the pandemic just getting infused with cash, and so it's so good to hear. I think our elders to share this, that there is something exciting about going to work and be like, I got to hustle today. And
right.
when you do that tat and you get that money and you eat the food from that, you appreciate it. Tastes much better, right?
Yeah, yeah,
It
yeah,
tastes 10
exactly.
times better because you earned
Yeah,
it.
yeah,
And what I plucked out of your statement is what Forrest's question was like, get out and engage, get out and go to the top. I love that you
yeah,
said,
yeah.
because if you just like sometimes people are so intimidated to go talk to the big dogs, and when you
Yes.
go up to them, they're like, hey, somebody made it here, let's talk. Like
Yeah, yeah,
let me
yeah,
share
yeah.
some stuff with you. Like you're here, cool.
Right.
And so I think that's great, and I'm hoping that anyone hears this, go talk to the person you're most scared to talk to. You may get shut
Yeah,
down, but you may learn some great stuff too. You may
exactly.
learn the next technique that just takes you to a paradigm shift. So I love
Right.
that. That's great.
Yeah, I like that
Um,
your method to kind of growing like that is the same advice people give today of like just go and get tattooed. Like that's the best way to learn. Like that worked for you then, and that's still what people are doing today.
Solid.
Yeah, the smart ones are for sure. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Like they
Yep.
they learn that's how you learn the most, man. Like there's whole apprenticeships where you're not even you're just watching. You know what I mean? Like so it's yeah. If you don't make some sacrifice to the tattoo gods, they're not gonna let you in. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah, I mean that's
Yeah.
why I'm as covered as
Well,
I am. It's the same way. I just kind of got like sucked into it, and the sharing of information and stories. Like, yeah, can't beat it.
yeah, right.
oh yeah. Yeah, I'm firmly confident that Forrest probably knows more about tattooing than most tattoo artists, and he doesn't tattoo.
Right,
So,
right, right. I can see that.
but no, I think it's gonna be great too if anyone is at a show and sees you there, Lucky, and has the opportunity to to bend your ear and kind of. I'm sure you're gonna just give them a wealth of knowledge. So I highly suggest anyone seeing this. You're super approachable. I can tell. So go and talk to Lucky and pick up the
Yeah,
next
man.
technique that's
Because I'm
gonna.
I'm there at these conventions whenever we do stuff. I mean, that's what I'm there for. I'm not tattooing, you know what I mean? Like I'm there to talk to the public and talk to tattooers and talk about tattoo history. So like, yeah, man, I want people. I know it's super intimidating sometimes, especially when you look at the booth and Jack's there and Charlie's there, and like it's a hard move to make, but still worth it because all these guys are sweethearts. That's the thing. Is
Yeah.
like all you
Yeah.
got to do is say hi, and they're more than willing to say hi back. So like, yeah, that's a great thing to instill in people. Is like, yeah, don't be afraid to talk to these guys, man, because they're waiting for you. You know what I mean?
hmm
Like
hmm
they want to talk about it.
Yeah, that's so good. Well, I know the website is Tattoo Heritage Project, and for us, we have the Instagram. It's like tattoo_heritage. But anyone want to get directly connected to you, Lucky? Like, how can we send people to you specifically?
My Instagram, Lucky Bastard FTW, is pretty easy to find. And then
Cool.
so you can direct message me through there if you need to, or
Hmm.
The Traveling Tattoo Museum also has an Instagram that you can find through mine or the Tattoo Heritage Project as well. But
Okay.
I think that's pretty much what we've noticed is that that's how people get information now. So that's I think they're still doing stuff, mirroring on Facebook. But like, yeah, we're pretty much utilizing that platform to get all of our information
Hmm.
out to people. So
Hmm.
those are the ways to kind of keep track of what we're doing and to be aware of when we do stuff. Because like I said, sometimes it'll be like, all right, we're doing this next week,
Hmm.
so yeah, keep an eye on us and like hopefully in the next few months we'll be getting into some more convention situations with Villain Arts and getting this thing off the road or on the road.
Nice.
Is there a
Nice. Well,
cutoff date for that $200 max art show you were talking about too? Like, do you want to give a last like call to action for that as well for any artists?
Yeah. Yeah, so you got to get that in by the 1st of December. The address for that's also on my Instagram and everybody else's that's involved. It's gonna You're gonna send that to Sullen to Jeremy Hanna and he'll deal with it from there. But yeah, it's $200 ready to hang. Send it in, and then all that money goes towards helping to get this thing off the ground and get the museum set up. So yeah, the more people that are
very cool.
involved in that aren't in California is awesome because there's a lot of California artists that do that, and it's not just restricted to California. Like I'd love to see some art from people outside of California that could
Hmm.
mail it in. Like I said, it doesn't have to be anything too crazy. It can be a line drawing, it can be a small painting, it can be whatever. It's just something. Like I said, we're very transactional people tattooers, so
Hmm.
I'll spend $200 on a painting I might not even like that much, more than I would give you $200. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
so it's just
That's
it's a
cool.
way to be involved and to give towards this thing, and like I said, it's the next thing we're doing. So we'd love to have you involved.
That's so cool. Yeah, I'd love to see one day, looking back on this at one point where somebody said, I saw this interview and I dropped a painting and I know the money went to the traveling tattoo history booths. And then now it's, this tattoo heritage project, like now there's this national museum, like I think it's going to be cool for someone one day to look back and realize that they could participate, which is something as simple as sending in art and kind of adding their link to the chain. So
Right.
I appreciate what you're doing, brother.
Thank you.
Thank you for carrying the torch forward, especially going out into the field, getting people involved, and keeping us moving, taking what's good and keeping it moving forward.
Well, thank you very much for letting me come on here and talk about it, man. I appreciate it.